The air in the boardroom hung thick with unspoken tension, a stark contrast to the usual buzz before a major presentation. Outside, the city lights sparkled in difference, but in this room, world-altering fortunes were supposedly about to be made. The long, polished mahogany table reflected the anxious faces of board members and the stern, expectant gaze of Mr. Harrison, a major investor whose buy-in could launch us into the stratosphere. On the far wall, the massive display screen glowed, ready to showcase Apex, the AI financial trading platform that was my life's work. It was supposed to be a triumph. My name is Victoria Vance. Until yesterday, I was the lead architect and, effectively, the beating heart behind Apex. For 10 years, I poured everything into that system. My nights, my weekends, entire relationships that couldn't compete with the demanding mistress of code and market data. I missed family holidays, skipped weddings, even walked away from a serious engagement because building Apex, making this company something legendary, felt like my singular purpose. It wasn't just software. It was my legacy, pixel by painstaking pixel, algorithm by complex algorithm. I kept a worn stress ball on my desk, the only thing that absorbed some of the physical tension during coding marathons. Seated at the head of the table was my father, Robert Vance, the CEO. Tonight, his usual easy charm was replaced by a rigid posture and eyes that darted everywhere but at me. Beside him sat my younger brother, James. He looked uncomfortable in his sharp suit, fidgeting with a pen, occasionally glancing at the display screen but carefully avoiding my gaze. James had joined the firm 5 years ago, drifting through various departments before landing in a vaguely defined strategic projects role. The presentation was scheduled to start any minute, but Robert cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the quiet room. "Before we begin the demonstration," he announced, his voice formal, "I have a brief announcement. As part of the firm's strategic evolution, the board has approved a change in leadership for our digital initiatives. Effective immediately, James will assume the role of Director of Digital Strategy, overseeing the Apex platform and its future direction." My blood ran cold. A dizzying wave hit me, but I forced myself to stay seated, my expression neutral. My eyes flickered to James. He still wouldn't look at me. Mr. Sterling, a hawk-faced board member notorious for his ruthless focus on short-term gains, gave a slight, smug nod from his seat. Robert continued, not looking at me. "Victoria, your technical contribution to Apex has been significant. Foundational even. However, the board feels that a new perspective, a more business-oriented approach, is needed to capitalize on its market potential. Your position as lead architect has been made redundant. Your access to the Apex core system has been terminated as part of this transition." Redundant. My life's work boiled down to a technical contribution, and I was redundant. The insult burned hotter than the betrayal. It wasn't just my job. They were stealing my child, my decade of sacrifice, and handing it to James. The internal scream was deafening, a raw cry of injustice and pain. But years of corporate battles had taught me to show nothing. My jaw was clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. I focused on a spot on the wall, breathing slowly, deliberately. "Understood," I said, my voice quiet but clear, carrying in the sudden, thick silence. I reached for my tablet, the one I used for secure remote monitoring and critical development tasks. With calm, precise movements, I tapped the screen a few times. I wasn't accessing Apex to save it. I was confirming that the final trigger sequence for the Guardian protocol, the safeguard I'd built in secret, was armed and ready. It wasn't reliant on them running something. It was tied to my disconnection and any attempt to run Apex without my unique digital signature. I closed the tablet, placing it carefully on the table. My eyes locked onto James, then shifted to father, then briefly, pointedly, to Sterling. "Just a quick reminder, James," I said, my voice even, perhaps with a faint, dangerous edge. "Apex requires the lead architect's continuous digital signature for stable operation. Without it, things can get unpredictable." And I added, my gaze hardening slightly as I looked at Sterling, "The Guardian protocol runs a full ethics audit if it detects unauthorized access or parameters being altered. Hope the system doesn't find anything unexpected during the live demonstration for Mr. Harrison." I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips, a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Then I stood up. I picked up my worn stress ball from the table, a small, defiant act of reclaiming something personal. Without another word or a backward glance, I turned and walked out of the boardroom. The silence I left behind felt brittle, stretched to the breaking point. The trap was set. They had just walked right into it. My mind replayed Robert's words as I walked through the silent, polished corridors. Redundant. It echoed in the empty space where my decade of dedication used to reside. I thought back to the beginning. Straight out of college, turning down offers from tech giants, bursting with naive faith in the idea of building something lasting with family. I started small, proving my worth in ways that had nothing to do with my engineering degree, just to understand the nuts and bolts of the firm. Then came Apex. It began as a side project, a quiet obsession fueled by caffeine and a burning desire to bring real innovation to an old-fashioned industry. I saw inefficiencies, missed opportunities, and I knew AI could change everything. Apex wasn't just code. It was countless sleepless nights spent drawing neural networks on whiteboards, debugging complex algorithms until dawn, missing family dinners, postponing every social event. There was a relationship once, with a kind man who finally couldn't compete with the demands Apex placed on my time and focus. He left, gently, telling me he admired my passion but couldn't build a life with someone who was already married to their work. It hurt deeply, but I told myself the sacrifice was for a greater purpose, not just my career, but the future of the Vance family firm. Initial success brought praise. Father was proud, boasting about my system. Apex didn't just trade faster. It learned, it adapted, it incorporated risk management and, crucially, ethical trading parameters I built in because I believed in doing things the right way. It was revolutionary. But over the past year, small cracks had started to appear in the shiny facade. Little things at first. Apex would flag unusual transaction patterns, large, round numbers, strange offshore routings, but before I could fully investigate, the logs related to them would mysteriously disappear. Access attempts to Apex's core logic from unfamiliar credentials. Meetings I wasn't invited to, followed by subtle shifts in company strategy that didn't make sense. Then came Claire. She was the head of risk management, a quiet, sharp woman with a reputation for absolute integrity. Over hushed coffee breaks or brief, seemingly casual encounters in the hallway, she started dropping veiled warnings. Victoria, Apex flagged something unusual again. Numbers that don't add up. Or, there's pressure from certain board members. Mr. Sterling especially, to streamline oversight. Things are being discussed in meetings I'm not permitted to audit. Once, she sent me a cryptic email with just a subject line. Watch your code. Claire was scared, clearly, but her discomfort was a blaring siren. That's when I started connecting the dots. The missing logs, the excluded meetings, James's sudden, awkward interest in the technical underpinnings of Apex's security protocols, Claire's warnings, Sterling's constant push for aggressive, potentially risky strategies. They weren't just sidelining me. They were planning to misuse Apex for financial gain, engaging in activities that would make the system's built-in ethics protocols scream. And I, the architect of those protocols, was the ultimate threat. The decision to build the trap wasn't born of simple vengeance. It was a cold, hard necessity. A visceral need to protect Apex, my creation, from being corrupted by the very people who were supposed to be its stewards, and to protect myself. If they were willing to steal my work and engage in fraud, they were capable of much worse. I realized I couldn't fight the politics head-on, but I could use the technology they coveted against them. I spent months working in absolute secrecy, pouring what little energy I had left after my official duties into building the Guardian protocol. It was a ghost in the machine, a secondary layer deeply interwoven into Apex's core. It required my unique digital signature, a complex, multi-factor authentication linked to my personal developer environment and biometric key, not just to access, but for Apex to run stably and optimally. Without that continuous handshake, its performance would degrade, errors would spike, and critically, if it detected any attempt to alter parameters, inject false data, or bypass its core functions while running without my signature, it would trigger. The trigger wasn't just a shutdown. It was a public audit display. Lines of code would pause, replaced by a scrolling log of every suspicious transaction, irregular access attempt, and flagged parameter change it had ever recorded. And simultaneously, it would begin securely streaming copies of this damning data, along with relevant internal communications Claire hinted at, to my private, encrypted server located offsite, thousands of miles away. It was a shield, a truth serum, and a time bomb, all rolled into one. Inspired by Claire's courage, I also quietly, legally, extracted copies of key documents she had referenced, vague meeting minutes hinting at flexible compliance standards, emails from Sterling discussing creative financial modeling with James, initial records of the suspicious transactions Apex had flagged before the logs disappeared. This provided independent evidence, a backup to the data Apex would expose. Waiting for them to make their move was agonizing. Every day felt like a performance. Knowing they were meeting, planning, trying to find a way around me. Thinking they could just flip a switch and take my life's work. I watched them, I prepared, and I waited. And in that boardroom moments ago, they had finally made their move. The cold air outside the boardroom felt sharp, a brutal reset button after the stifling tension inside. My mind, however, was a whirlwind of calculated steps. No tears, no anger yet. Just a cold, sharp focus. I ignored the first few calls buzzing my phone, unknown corporate numbers, likely desperate attempts to understand what I'd meant about the ethics audit. I drove, not home, but to a small, secure office space I had rented months ago under a shell company, located across town. It was bare bones but equipped with redundant power, secure satellite internet, and a bank of monitors linked to my encrypted offsite servers. This was my command center, my private sanctuary from which I would watch the carefully constructed facade crumble. I set up quickly, logging into my secure dashboard. On one screen, the live feed of the boardroom presentation flickered to life. On another, the interface for the Guardian protocol glowed ominously, showing its current status. Active. Monitoring. Signature absent. A third screen displayed the feed from my off-site encrypted storage, ready to receive the data stream. Robert and James were at the front of the boardroom now, standing beside the main display screen. Robert, regaining some of his composure, began his practice speech, introducing James and touting Apex's revolutionary performance. James stood awkwardly, occasionally nodding along, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't possess. Mr. Harrison was front and center, eyes narrowed, a picture of formidable expectation. The demo started. James navigated through the initial canned parts of the presentation, showcasing Apex's speed and interface using pre-approved, clean data. They highlighted impressive, and I knew inflated, projected returns based on the very strategies Apex's Guardian protocol would flag. The tension in the room, though, remained. Everyone was waiting for the live element, the real-time market simulation they promised. The moment arrived about 15 minutes in, precisely when they were supposed to switch to the live data feed to demonstrate Apex's real-time capabilities on a volatile market simulation designed to impress Mr. Harrison. James clicked a button. The screen didn't transition smoothly. It flickered violently, like a bad signal. Static briefly consumed the display. James fumbled with the mouse, his face paling. Robert leaned in, whispering urgently to him. On my monitor, the Guardian protocol status changed to Anomaly detected. Unauthorized parameter injection attempt. Initiating audit display. Then it began. The screen in the boardroom cleared, but not to the planned market simulation. Instead, large, bold red letters appeared. Guardian protocol, ethical noncompliance detected. Unauthorized access and data manipulation attempt. A collective gasp went through the boardroom feed. James stammered, trying to click away, but the interface was frozen. Robert grabbed the mouse from him, clicking furiously. Nothing happened. Then, the display shifted. The red warning remained at the top, but the rest of the screen filled with rapidly scrolling lines of text. It wasn't abstract code. It was raw data, pulled directly from Apex's internal logs and my pre-prepared evidence. This wasn't a simple error message. It was a public indictment. Transaction IDs flashed by, linked to large, suspicious amounts and offshore routings. Internal communication logs appeared, showing conversations between Sterling and James discussing parameter adjustments and flexibility regarding transfers. System access logs detailed James's attempts to modify the ethical filters. Email fragments from father to Sterling hinted at the plan to remove me before an audit. It was a torrent of undeniable proof, scrolling relentlessly for everyone in that room to see. The room on the feed dissolved into chaos. Robert's face was sheet white, his mouth opening and closing silently. James looked utterly destroyed, frozen in horror. Mr. Sterling was half out of his seat, yelling, pointing at the screen. Mr. Harrison, however, was the most terrifying. He stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the scrolling data, his face a mask of cold, absolute fury. He wasn't pointing at the screen. He was pointing, it seemed, at Robert. Sitting in my silent office, watching the live feed, I felt a wave of exhaustion wash over me. It was done. Apex had done its job. It had protected itself, and in doing so, exposed the truth they had desperately tried to bury. I watched the numbers and logs scroll, irrefutable proof of their greed and betrayal, now visible to the very people they needed to impress. The ringing of my phones intensified, a chorus of panic. I took a slow sip of water, my hand steady. The truth was out. The ringing wouldn't stop. My phones were alive with the digital screams of their unraveling world. I watched the boardroom feed for a few more minutes until it finally cut out. Likely someone had the sense or the desperation to yank a cable. Then I leaned back, closing my eyes for a brief moment, letting the silence of my secure room settle around me. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a profound weariness. It wasn't triumph I felt, not yet. Just grim finality. I started checking messages. Voicemails piled up. Robert's voice was a tight wire, oscillating between demands. "Victoria, you need to fix this now," and thinly veiled threats. "This is damaging the firm. You're destroying everything." James sounded on the verge of tears, rambling about how it wasn't his fault, how he was just caught in the middle, how Dad made him do it. Pathetic. There were calls from board members I barely knew, suddenly wanting to be my best friend. Then came a message from Angela F., head of investor relations. It was formal, carefully worded. "Ms. Vance, the board requires your immediate technical assistance regarding the Apex platform. Significant stakeholders are expressing concerns. We understand there may have been a misunderstanding. A revised compensation package and a senior role are being discussed. Please contact us urgently." A misunderstanding? They tried to steal my life's work and commit fraud, and it was a misunderstanding. The sheer corporate audacity was breathtaking. I decided to answer one call. Not from family, but from Mr. Harrison's private line. His voice, when I answered, was colder than the Arctic wind. "Victoria." "What was that?" He didn't yell. His quiet intensity was far more intimidating. "Those numbers, that data scrolling across the screen. Was it real?" "Yes, Mr. Harrison," I replied, my voice calm and steady. "Every single point. It was Apex's Guardian protocol doing exactly what I built it to do, flag and expose unethical or unauthorized activity. It detected attempts to manipulate its parameters and access funds through irregular channels, activities linked to the data you saw. It triggered because its core validation signature, mine, was removed and bypassed." There was a long silence. "You built an ethics watchdog?" he asked, a note of something akin to a mixed with his fury. "I built a system with integrity, Mr. Harrison," I corrected. "Something designed to protect itself and the funds it manages from anyone, including its owners, should they attempt to misuse it. And my investment," he stated, his voice sharp again. "And the reputation of every investor in that room. Sterling was behind this, wasn't he?" "The data speaks for itself," I said, referring back to the scrolling logs. "And I have a complete, secure copy of everything Apex flagged, plus additional documentation." I knew revealing this leverage was key. Mr. Harrison wasn't motivated by family loyalty, but by financial exposure and legal risk. He was silent again, processing. "The board is in chaos," he finally said. "Offers are being pulled. Sterling and several others are trying to distance themselves. They need that system running, Victoria. They need you." "I understand," I said. and I'm willing to discuss, but not under their previous terms, or any offer that attempts to buy my silence or limit my control over Apex. Send me your terms, he ordered, bypassing the firm entirely. Directly. If you can fix this, if you can restore confidence, we, the investors, will back you. I drafted my terms carefully. They were steep, non-negotiable, and designed to restructure the power dynamics entirely. Full recognition as Apex's creator, written into the firm's official records. Majority IP ownership, 60% of Apex, mine outright. Absolute, final authority over all Apex development, implementation, and ethical oversight. Veto power over any transaction or initiative Apex flagged. A significant, undeniable financial settlement for the unauthorized use of my work and IP, $10 million. And non-negotiable conditions regarding those responsible. Sterling removed from the board and the firm, James removed from any role related to Apex or finance, father transitioning to a non-executive, figurehead role with no authority over my division. I sent the document to Mr. Harrison and, formally, to Angela, with a deadline. That evening, a text message arrived from father's assistant. Mr. Vance requests your presence for a private dinner tonight at Lavinia at 7 p.m. to discuss the future of the firm and your role. A reservation has been made under Vance. Lavinia. His favorite restaurant, where we'd celebrated milestones like the firm's first major public offering, Apex's launch, moments when I still believed in the family aspect of the business. I almost didn't go, but I remembered something my old mentor used to say: never walk away from the table when they're finally ready to admit they need you. Make them say it out loud. So I dressed sharply, not for a family dinner, but for a high-stakes negotiation. I went. I arrived at Lavinia precisely at 7 p.m. Father was already seated at our usual corner table, a glass of wine in hand, looking tired and considerably older than he had the night before. He stood when he saw me approach. "Victoria." "Dad." No hugs. No pretense of warmth. The air between us was thick with everything left unsaid and everything that had just happened. We sat. He studied me across the table, searching my face for, what? Anger? Sadness? He found neither. "You look well," he offered, the attempt at small talk falling flat. "I am." He cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "You certainly made an impression yesterday. The board is in turmoil." "Funny," I said, a faint smile touching my lips. "I've been making impressions for years. You just weren't looking." That silenced him for a moment. Then came the sigh, the familiar sound of forced weariness and perceived burden. "Look," he began, steepling his fingers. "We miscalculated. Pushing you out was premature. Especially with the demonstration." "Premature," I echoed, my voice soft but sharp. "Or necessary, because Apex was about to expose the fraud you, James, and Sterling were involved in?" His eyes widened slightly, then narrowed. "Fraud? That's a strong word, Victoria. There were aggressive strategies being explored. James was perhaps misguided." "Misguided?" I leaned forward slightly. "Dad, I have the data. Apex logs, cross-referenced with emails Claire helped me find, internal documents. I know about the offshore accounts, the plan parameter adjustments to hide the losses, the timeline to get me out before the year-end audit. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. A criminal plan using my life's work." I paused, letting the weight of the accusation hang in the air. "You handed my creation, my legacy, to James like a participation trophy, knowing he and Sterling were going to corrupt it." He jaw tightened. "You're being unreasonable. James may not have your technical skill, but he has vision. He's my son. He has ambition," I countered, my voice firm, "and you handed him mine. You chose nepotism and greed over integrity and the daughter who actually built the future of this company." I could see the excuses dying in his eyes. He knew I had the evidence, and I wasn't afraid to use it. "What do you want, Victoria?" The question I had been waiting for, stripped of pretense. "My terms were sent to Angela and Mr. Harrison," I stated. "Recognition, ownership, control, compensation, and consequences for those who tried to steal and corrupt Apex. Sterling's gone, James is out of anything related to finance, and your role regarding Apex will be purely nominal. 60% IP? $10 million? That's outrageous. It's fair, I corrected him. Considering I could release the full audit data publicly, triggering SEC investigations and destroying the firm's reputation entirely. This is your chance to contain the damage and rebuild under my leadership for Apex. You raised me to protect what I build, Dad. You just never thought that lesson would apply to you. He looked away for the first time, staring out the window at the city lights. Shame? Defeat? It didn't matter. He finally nodded. The documents will be drawn up. As we stood to leave, I added one more thing, quietly but with absolute finality. And Dad, I'm not coming back to be your employee, or James's collaborator, or your daughter helping out the family business. I'm coming back as the owner of Apex and a leader of this firm. As your equal. Don't you ever forget that. He gave a slow, measured nod. Understood. Monday morning felt different. The air in the building was charged, thick with rumors and speculation. The front desk staff straightened noticeably as I walked in. Marcus, the security guard who used to barely nod, gave me a crisp, respectful "Good morning, Ms. Vance." I nodded back, wondering how much he knew. Probably everything that mattered. In my hand, I held my new access card. The title printed on it in bold silver letters was clear: Chief Executive Officer, Apex Division, and Lead Architect. It wasn't just a title. It was a declaration. The elevator ride up felt like ascending into a new reality. My floor, formerly the Innovation Wing, was now the Apex Division headquarters. I walked towards where my old office used to be. It hadn't just been emptied. It had been stripped bare, hastily repainted, and furnished with James's overtly modern, expensive-looking taste. My personal items were in a couple of sad-looking boxes stacked by the door, labeled "Discard." The framed photo of the original Apex team I had cherished was missing. It was a calculated insult, a final petty act of disrespect. James was sitting at my old desk, looking even more miserable than he had at the dinner. He looked up, startled, his face tightening. "Victoria." "James," I said, my voice calm cool. "You've made yourself comfortable." He stood up, defensively. "You've got nerve showing up here. After what you pulled." I allowed myself a small, dry smile. "Funny. That's exactly what I thought when I found out you and Sterling were using my platform to run a shadow accounting operation." "I wasn't running it," he stammered, flushing. "Dad and Sterling. Dad told me to." "Don't." I cut him off, stepping closer. "Don't put this on Dad entirely." He gave the order, yes. "But you participated. You sat in the meetings. You tried to access Apex's ethical filters. You stood by while they planned to discard me and corrupt my work. You chose your position over integrity." I opened my tablet, displaying the emails and documents I had copied, including communications between him and Sterling. "Claire provided some of these," I said quietly. "Apex's Guardian protocol provided the rest." His eyes darted between the screen and my face. He was trapped. "So what now?" he asked, defeated. "You're just back." "I'm back," I confirmed, sliding a printed copy of the new agreement across the desk. "But nothing's the same. I now hold majority IP ownership of Apex. All development, all implementation, all oversight runs through me. As per the terms, you have no access to Apex, effective permanently." He stared at the contract, his mouth slightly agape. "That's ridiculous. You can't just." "I can," I stated simply. And I did. Mr. Sterling resigned this morning. Several board members are facing internal review. And you, I paused, looking at him, not with malice but cold truth, are being moved to a different division, far from finance or technology. A non-client-facing role. If you choose to stay. He sank back into the chair, stunned into silence. I turned to leave, pausing in the doorway. "James," I said, my voice softening slightly, but not yielding. "If you had just asked. If you had come to me, told me what was happening, what they wanted you to do, I would have helped you. We could have faced it together. But you went along with it. You chose the easy path, the path of betrayal. That kind of thinking has consequences." I walked out, leaving him alone in what used to be my office. Later that day, settled in my new office, spacious, functional, with a clear view of the city's skyline. I reviewed Apex's live reports. With my digital signature re-established, the Guardian protocol wasn't just a tripwire, it was an active, transparent compliance layer. It seamlessly managed workflows, flagged potential risks, and ran real-time audits. Apex was humming, more powerful and secure than ever. Angela knocked, entering with a list of client inquiries. 4 major enterprise clients called this morning, she said, a mix of exhaustion and excitement on her face. Word got out about the Apex Ethical Compliance Protocol. They're calling it the Apex Standard. They want it. Good, I said. Schedule the meetings. And Angela? Every new implementation includes full, transparent access to the audit logs for the client and quarterly independent compliance reviews. No more hiding anything. Apex is about trust now. She smiled, understanding. That's bold. It's necessary, I replied. I've seen firsthand what happens when power and technology fall into the wrong hands. As she left, I leaned back. The office was quiet. For the first time in a long time, I felt a profound sense of control. Not over others, but over my work, my integrity, my future. I checked my inbox. One new message. From Father. Subject, Apex. Victoria, it read. I have reviewed the final documents. I understand the terms are absolute. You have made your position clear. For what it is worth, I am proud of what you built, even if I didn't show it in the right way. Robert. I didn't reply, not out of malice, but because sometimes silence is the most powerful statement. The boundary had been drawn. This wasn't just a business anymore. This was mine, and it would be run with the integrity it deserved.